This chapter is on the study selection procedure and the data extraction procedure. Following the search, you now have a huge search result with lots of items or reports or studies that you need to sift through to figure out which ones you should keep. And then the ones you keep, you want to extract data from. So screening is the process of identifying relevant studies from your search results. It's typically done in two stages. In the first stage, you screen title and abstract. It's a quick pass through to exclude clearly irrelevant studies. And at this stage, if you're in any doubt if a study should be included or not, you just keep it. You don't want to take away something that actually should have been kept later on. At this stage, you should remove stuff that clearly doesn't fit in. So if you're doing a study on alcohol interventions and there's studies on alcohol as a solvent, then that's obviously not what you're looking for. So those are excluded immediately. What happens in reality is probably that you do multiple passes. You do one really quick pass through, just remove everything that's relevant, and then go back once again to see a little bit more in detail reading what's relevant and not, but still just sticking to title and abstracts. Once you've narrowed it down and you've decided that in this list of literature that I've screened now and what's left, I cannot, through only the title and abstract, decide if they should be included or not. Then we go to the next step, which is a full text screening. So you look at the entire paper and you screen it to see if it fits your inclusion or exclusion criteria. And how I typically approach it is as I read it, and as soon as I see, okay, here is something that disqualifies it from the review, then obviously I stop reading, I exclude it, and save some time. Once you have your selection that you want to keep, I like to think of this as your data. So the studies that you're holding in your hands, well, you're probably not holding them in your hands, they're in your computer, but metaphorically speaking, the ones you're holding in your hand, this is now your data. It's like you were doing, if you're doing a survey, then you might ask patients to respond to a questionnaire. And once they respond and you get the questionnaires from them, that will be your data. But here, the studies that you've selected for inclusion, that's now your surveys, so your questionnaires. This is your data. And we want to extract something very specific from these. We create a data extraction form where we say exactly what items from these studies that we want to extract. It could be information about the population, sample sizes, effect sizes, etc. And creating a standardized template ensures that we always do the same thing for each study. This is even more important if there are a lot of people involved in the systematic review, if there are multiple people doing data extraction and so on. And ideally, you pilot this form on a few studies first to make sure that it actually works and that everybody is in agreement of how this form should be applied to each study. So what do you extract? Well, it really depends on your research question, but very typically we extract, who are the authors, when was it published, in which country was the study conducted, what was the study design, what were the age of participants, health status of participants, what details are there of the intervention that was being studied, details of the comparison, details about outcomes. Again, you can see the whole PICO coming back here, right? This is the stuff that we want to extract out of these studies. And a tip for how to approach this is to say, well, if you envision your final systematic review, what kind of tables do you want to produce there and present for the reader? That should guide you in figuring out what you need to extract. When you actually do the extraction, you have to also remember that sometimes the data isn't in tables or sometimes they're in figures. So you might have to look at figures to try to figure out values, or they might be in appendices to the paper. And if you cannot find data that you need, you can always contact the authors and ask them. That's very common. And you should always try to get as much information as possible from each paper so that you don't have any form of missing data.